Hello, everyone. This is Pure Purpose number 11, and today's topic is deep thinking versus shallow thinking. This is what the random number generator brought to us. If you are interested in these topics that we're discussing every Saturday, every morning, please subscribe to the channel, post any comments that you have. We'll get back to them. Questions are good. Thoughts are good. Opinions are good. Everything's good. Like if you disagree, that's amazing because we might learn something from it. So I've got Dee and Anthony today. So thank you very much, guys, for joining. As usual, deep thinking versus shallow thinking. Let's just say Anthony starts off. Anthony's like the big guy. Let's just get him to see what his mind download says today.
Awesome. The big guy. Mind on a stick. This is a fun one for me. So there's a little, a kind of a rant, but not necessarily an angry rant, but that I've been wanting to have for a little while about this because I keep seeing this message out in the in the universe, and especially on the whole social media thing. It says something along the lines of "Don't think, just do stuff." It seems like someone like thinking is the enemy, and you know, just taking action and getting feedback, and you'll find things out. And if you just stop thinking and do stuff, and it seems to me that's a really unfortunate and at times dangerous message to put out into the world. You know, there are at times lots of places in our lives where we have, you know, sort of important, crucial decisions to make that have huge long-term implications for not only our lives, but you know, our family, our careers, our businesses, all kinds of things, and we're somehow supposed to just not think about it and just do it.
So I suppose the third level of thinking then is, so there's like deep thinking, shallow thinking, and not thinking at all.
Yeah, I mean, I get that it's always trying to point to this place of you know, no thought, of being in a state of flow. Or I think there's a quote from Eckhart Tolle which says something like, you know, if you're really stuck in your head, if you're really overthinking everything, then the appropriate response might be to just go out and do something to get you unstuck. And within that context, it makes sense, but it just does seem like, you know, I don't know, thinking is the new enemy. Whereas what I'm discovering at the moment is that the more that I think, or the more clearly that I think, the more, you know, drill down, the more specific, you know, definitions, requests, understandings that I create, the better my life seems to be becoming. So I think I'm all for deep thinking.
All right. So Dee, what's your take on the shallow thinking, deep thinking, no thinking, integral thinking, design thinking? Please tell us. You're on mute. Unmute yourself.
Sorry, my laptop just froze, so I missed what Anthony said and what you just asked me. All I heard was design thinking.
So what are your takes? What are your take? It's a simple question of simple question. What's your take on the deep thinking versus shallow thinking versus no thinking versus integral thinking versus design thinking, or any other thinking that you think is relevant for success, preferably right now and forever, and sustainably and happily.
I love when you
That's
ask
what-
these very
that's what we're
simple
after.
questions, Jason.
That's what we're after.
I love when you ask these very simple questions. So one thing that I really like about this show is the way that we generate these questions based off of the, our like number game. So it was like deep thinking versus shallow thinking. And the first question that came up was, well, how do I know if I'm a deep thinker? How do I know if I'm a shallow thinker, right? And it led me to maybe my first moment in like my first epiphany when I remember having a conversation with someone when I was 18 years old. And at that time I just moved from like the Bronx to my first like suburban area in New Jersey, right? And so the people in New Jersey really lived this nice, very cushioned life. And they had asked me, I remember at 18, they're like, what is the meaning of life? And I was like, what are they smoking? Like, I don't know. And I used to get so offended because I never knew how to answer any of these questions. And so when I get challenged with stuff like that, my immediate reaction to it was like to get really upset or just ignore it completely. And I was like, maybe I'm a shallow thinker, but I didn't even realize it until after the fact, right? So the way that I measured, at least at my end, in terms of how was I able to convert from one way of thinking that the whole world and everything around me is just this way versus to being very open. I started to notice, two key things. So one was slowly not having any more interest in like mainstream culture and like these popular activities, right? So it's like a lot of the things that used to resonate with me in terms of interest didn't really anymore. And in terms of like aspirations, that's, common to the majority of people. And I wasn't enjoying a lot of the things that everyone does, say for instance, like watching TV. So having to engage and be in discussions with people that would talk about, just watching TV or shopping with friends or, gossiping about other people, that stuff slowly became very irritating to me, right? So, and I often wonder how is it possible to waste so much time on things that don't really essentially matter in this world? So, in general, just having zero time and interest for mundane stuff started to make me question a lot of things. And then the second one that really stood out to me was having this profound frustration with modern society, just looking at everything and being completely frustrated with the way everything is. So, whether any of us here follow what's happening in the world or not, there's one thing that's clear, that, a lot of people are very pessimistic about the future of humanity, right? And it's like it seems as if it's constantly moving away from true values and going back to things that really matter. So all this ignorance, and I know that people keep tossing it around that ignorance is bliss, but I think that in itself is shallow thinking, and superficiality that people have today really makes us think that human race is doomed. And the only way to fix that is to embrace these other methods of thinking. And I think it's really cool that we have shows like this, so it helps people have the what the fuck moments.
Oh, right. So here's my bunch of takes on this topic. I've spent all my life designing things, and as I've worked on projects, I've recognized that they were getting increasingly more and more complicated in nature. So whereas back in early 2000s, we would struggle for months and months to build what's known as dynamic website, in other words, all these things that now you see is kind of almost given for granted. even though like Google Hangouts breaks all the time, and we're having to update everything all the time, but generally speaking, it works. Back in the day, it was hard enough to make a blog website where people can comment and so on. So that took months and teams of like hundreds of people. Nowadays, you can just have that on a click of a button. And then because everyone can have that on a click of a button, the question is, what's the uniqueness of your business, right? Because someone says, oh, we're building this new cool social network for deep thinkers. And it's like, oh man, dude, like that's like, I don't want to sign up to another thing. I'm already on Facebook. There's a lot of deep thinkers. I've spoken to millions of people, and it's like, it's hard to find them. So it's like, it's very hard to find unique selling point for anything, let alone for something that will be unique selling for a long, long time. The main differentiator seems to be over and over and over again that like you have to deal with bigger, more complex problems to find to build a business that's longer term sustainable. There isn't really anything anymore that's simple in nature that takes 3 days to turn around, and then you just kind of like see this kind of hockey stick business model kind of happening. So that requires tons and tons of deep thinking to come up with and work out and clarify and crystallize and sort of go through. Having said that, deep thinking, as in like you kind of sit there and go through, like, let's say, like a huge journey of a customer life cycle or something like that, or you really kind of sit there and ponder about this meaning of life, or these kind of heavy complex topics, or they seemingly are described as heavy complex topics, but we know that like if we're in a kind of meditative state, in a state of flow and so on, we can handle a lot more without kind of going so this deep thinking to work out like a big system is also often coupled with lots and lots of little shallow thinking kind of thought experiments, chit chats. And it's like, what about if we did this? No. As soon as I said that, it's like, it's bullshit. But it's cool. I'm glad I kind of got that out of my mind. And it's like, what if we did this? What about, what, do you know this? Do you know, how about we try this? We try this quick conversations that kind of either sort of qualify things for deeper thinking purposes or disqualify things because they're just like obviously nonsense or not going to work for that particular project or purpose. And so I think both deep thinking and shallow thinking are important, but I think deep thinking is like something that you would kind of say, okay, I'm going to contemplate on why cacti have prickles on them for 3 hours and kind of develop a big story about it, maybe like come up with some sort of, cartoon narrative about it. And that's perfectly great. But out of that, you need to take some longer term lessons and takeaways from it. And the shallow thinking is really about quickly going through a bunch of simple things. Should we do this? Should we not do this? What about this? What's my next sort of set of goals to do or tasks for next hour? And you can quickly ideate and come up with lots and lots of potential ideas to explore further. And you shouldn't sort of judge yourself too much and just go like, yeah, cactuses live in Mexico. Mexico's cool. There's like sunny days, all this kind of stuff. You can just ideate rapidly, and from those kind of hundreds of ideas, maybe 2 or 3 are worth kind of exploring into deeper thinking realm. But I think then going off into design thinking, in my experience, design thinking thinks like this very much, where it's like, well, we can run a big, deep empathy session with lots and lots of people and go like into depths of their context and experiences and emotions and so on, or you can just quickly go into a rapid fire one question round with people to just get like a pulse reading on what people think. So both is very important and very valuable, and I think it's even probably good to balance this out in life, and certainly not going to sit there like pondering all your life, but also not kind of going just like let's just do, and you're not thinking anything about what you're doing. Anthony, what's your take on my kind of quick ad hoc synopsis?
Well, what's come to mind is I think there's a right mind question, and what I mean by that is in terms of our our thinking and our decision making, especially what Diana said about very large portion of humanity is very pessimistic about the future, and I think a lot of the reason for that is that most of the time many of us are not in our right minds. We are thinking and deciding from incredible amounts of anxiety that neuroscience is now discovering that is in the lower cortex rather than the amygdala, although it seems to all of that sort of anxiety overthinking rather than deep or even shallow thinking seems to grow the amygdala, so people are effectively living in like fear states or high anxiety states, and unable to make clear decisions, challenged in order to take risks, and seeing all of the the negative alarming news, and then piecing together narratives and ideas about how screwed up the world is, or their lives, or that kind of thing. And I think it's interesting because that again, it seems to me that design thinking and various other forms of thinking in that way operates very much in the higher cortex, in these states of not necessarily what you might call a natural flow, rather than the psychological flow state. Where we are, we're calm, we feel, connected, we're able to ask these, penetrating and bigger questions, and we feel like we have the, the time, the skill, the creativity to seek out these complex solutions. And I also think we underestimate, or we're not aware of what you said about how complex things are now. The number of choice, we are now in a situation where we can choose our religion, we choose our relationship, what kind of relationship, what kind of business we want to be in, how we want to work, where we want to live, what kind of a family we want to have, if we have a family, and all of these decisions that even 20, 30, 40 years ago were essentially taken care for you by society. You lived, this is how you live your life. So I think it's really interesting to notice that base level of complexity that most of us are given.
All right, Dee, I can see you like eager to kind of continue on what Anthony was saying, or respond to a bunch of points that he made. I've got a bunch of responses as well. I can't wait to make them.
I was just in deep thought, gentlemen.
Okay, so does that mean I can respond to Anthony?
By all means, and I do have stuff to add into
okay.
as well.
So I'm actually like almost cheating a little bit here because I'm making notes as I go along, because a lot of kind of things popping into my mind. And so I think with this deep thinking aspect is really about, you might just like, for the sake of more clarity, because we're sort of saying, what is deep thinking? Do I even know if I'm deep thinking or not? I think the better term would be integral thinking. And integral means both in terms of like all these levels of consciousness as per spiral dynamics, but it also, to me, means thinking with all your brains. So your brain with your kind of three variants, like conscious, subconscious, and reptilian brain, but then also your lungs, your heart, your gut, right? And really even your entire body as a kind of brain, because it's sensing the world. And so, just recently I was doing a talk and there was like a panel discussion about data-driven design and all this kind of stuff. And, I always, whenever someone says data-driven design, I always think of Alan Watts talking about, you have a 6-month project and then, you kind of go off and research for 5 months and you gather all this data, and then you look at the data and you can't see any patterns in it, you can't see any trends. And then you go like, oh shit, we've got another month to finish this project off. And then you start making gut decisions, your instinct decisions. And it's like, we could have done this like 5 months ago, but we went off and researched and gathered the data. I think a lot of people get lost in this data gathering thing. Like it's kind of going, it's basically like, you go off into the forest and you pick like tiny little fruits, that you find, and then you gather all that stuff. That's your data, and you bring it back to your garden. It's like, now I have to make a meal, but I don't know how to cook. I don't know what of these ingredients will go together. I don't know if any of this stuff is like poisonous or not. I don't know if it's like contaminated, sort of nearby sewage works or whatever. And I don't know if I'm like maybe allergic to it, So as a designer, then you have to take those data items and cook them into a meal that is compliant with all the kind of standards and regulations in the industry and expectations, big word there, expectations of people, and serve it en masse so that it makes sense. And people are like, yeah, that's cool, that's cool. That's exactly what I wanted. And they didn't know in the first place what they wanted. And so that was my kind of thing. So I think this deep thinking is really that integral thing, which requires us to be more of a kind of full stack human, i.e. in tune and congruent with all these brains that we have, both mind and body and everything. And then the other thing that I wanted to make a point about is that, yes, as we are going forward, there's a lady called Natasha Vita Moore, who is the so-called leader of Humanity Plus movement, which talks about merging of man and machine, humans and machines. And, she talks in her presentations as like, in future, we could change our bodies, like our bodies can be completely modular, and you could choose to be a man 1 week, a woman another week, or you could choose to have skin that is bulletproof, designed by Versace, or Armani, and she's like, I'd love to wear Armani skin. I'd love to see what he comes up with design-wise. Dee, what do you think?
That reptilian lady. So on the flip side of things, because I know that we're harping on a lot about the power of deep thinking, design thinking, integral thinking, vigorous thinking, all of these, right? The one benefit to me having been a shallow thinker most of my life, admittedly, is that I understand what kind of level I can speak to someone and then really be able to coach them in ways to level their awareness, right? And especially nowadays in like this age of tech and our access that we have, it's like, quality thinking even is really difficult to come by, right? So instead like this shallow instinct, just doing things based off of reaction, is a lot more driven. And even worse, superficial thinking, right? Superficial thinking is heavily promoted in everyday media, just in everything around us. So it's not like in this deep thinking, vigorous thinking, it's no longer in this shining light. And oftentimes it's like, it's difficult to find people to have these meaningful conversations with, right? So because there's so much trivial entertainment and information that just overstimulates us, that we can easily and immediately be distracted by it. So being surrounded by a lot of like this noisy information out there, it draws our attention, right, from important things to the significant. So for me, one of the biggest challenges that I love being able to figure out and have various ideas on is, how do we get people from their very, very limited mindset and allow them to grow and develop, and just for us to be able to support and nurture that, to the masses, really to the masses. So because the one thing that's really, really incredible about, people that are very deep in thought, we're like addicted to being stimulated in our minds, right? With all of these various streams of information, with talking to different people that can give us new insight and direction and vision and approach to things. And I think for me, I knew that I was almost afraid even, right? When I was starting this journey, I was like afraid to be deep in thought. Why? Is because I had to, for deep thinkers, you're always in silence. And the way that I looked at it, I'm like, oh, it's isolation. And that's kind of weird. That's, but now I spend a lot of time alone, a great deal, by myself, lost in my thoughts, journaling and sketching. And that's when a lot of these bigger breakthrough happens. So I think it's one thing for people that are watching this, especially on replay, is that we're being so consumed, and even being forced to not be silent, to constantly be in this busyness state. So how do we get out from this state that we're in to elevate, right? And one of my favorite quotes, I know I even like turned it into a meme, is from Albert Einstein. And okay, I wrote it. And it's saying that the world as we have created is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. So it just goes to show how important and vital being able to shift our mindset is, because it changes the way that we feel, the way that we act, the way that we make decisions, and the way that we think just greatly shapes every single aspect of our lives, and it affects everyone around us. So for me, like the call to action every single day is, how do we improve it? How do we improve it? And how many people can I speak to today in order to shift their mindset? I'm going to give you an example, and then I'll pass the mic on. Is so, it's with everything that's happening here in New York City. Here in New York City, it's in high alert, right? So all of the bridges and all of the tunnels, and they're just saying, oh, there's going to be an attack at any single time. New York City is in high alert. It's like, listen, New York City is like the top city in the world. We're always going to be in high alert, right? And so they're like, Diana, you shouldn't go into the city at all. You should just stay at home, because it's saying everywhere on the news, and it's on the newspaper. And I just told two of my friends, yesterday at brunch, I said, listen, I am not going to allow fear or what media or anything is telling me to go about how I want to do my day, because they want to keep us in this paranoia, and that's exactly what they want us to do. So just doing that one small thing, just sharing with them, saying, it doesn't really matter. Like if I want to go across the store to or drive into the city, I'm just going to do that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Anthony, Jason, as to what are ways that you have helped others in terms of becoming more thoughtful leaders, thought-provoking leaders.
Wow, some heavy questions there. Anthony, are you on the stream of thought, or what's going on?
Am I on a stream of thought? I was just thinking about that. What's the thing? I've been in my own I don't know, fascinating sort of contemplation over the last few days about how I have unconsciously been sort of operating and acting from some places of victimhood, and just I think my favorite victimhood statement there is, they want us to do this. I'm like, well, maybe, or a more, I guess a more simpler, sometimes a more simpler explanation is that states of, as we discussed yesterday, that states of high anxiety and high fear can be incredibly compelling and intoxicating, and our challenge is to learn how to occupy and maintain, if you like, higher states or more embodied states of calm, love, joy, and learn for that to be the our message in terms of not only our thoughts but our actions, and how we communicate, and and seek to that to be a more powerful message, even though it may seem that we're the only ones for hundreds of miles around capable of being in that place. And for me, that's my learning and challenge at the moment, again, as I think we discussed, is for me to find ways of bringing that message and landing that into relatively simple words that may be something for more of a mass group.
So okay, I actually finished, for the first time ever in my life, I watched a documentary, or listened to a documentary about Buddha's life, and this whole thing of like how the guy like put himself through an absolute torment in life, self-torment, to kind of gain enlightenment, and then came to a conclusion that we are already enlightened as we are, and really it's kind of getting more into the tune with others as well, which is kind of where this whole paradox lies in. Because yesterday, Anthony, we were discussing this thing of like your state, the state that you hold, let's say if it's a good positive state, is often kind of attacked by external forces, whether it's people, environment, etc. And it's a question of, why would you inherit other people's state that is lower than yours in terms of like lower quality energy, negative? And so that has been the biggest kind of thing for me, really, because I'm naturally kind of this kind of hyped, energetic, positive driven guy. Now within that, I might be really deep thinking, but you might not even be able to tell that, as I'm chatting to you, whatever, I'm still thinking about why trees are green, right? And I'm like pondering it out subconsciously. And I've been practicing this kind of thing of like doing one conscious thing and parallel parking, so to speak, this coffee. I just said I want coffee, and then it comes to me. You see, this is the kind of power of the mind. You know, you kind of I'm talking to you consciously about deep thinking, but subconsciously I was thinking about coffee, and I just manifested the coffee. So the point here is that you can think in many parallels, right? And like one of them might be that, you know, you're contemplating the next classical piece that you're going to write on piano with a machina here, which is a drum machine. So you might be contemplating in that while you are writing an article for your next book about business. And in parallel with that, you're feeling the environment around you. So you could be doing 3-4 track kind of thinking in parallel. And in fact, there is a way, in my experience, there's a way to stack this up so that you can be doing a conscious activity and in parallel another subconscious activity. And, you know, the other day I heard that basketball players, who was telling me this? They said like, I met a guy who was working on some sort of neuro kind of technology thing. There's some sort of neuro accelerator, which is about this like biotechnology and augmenting sort of living world and stuff. And he said, apparently like basketball players now practice with some sort of earphones in their brains, which are like these kind of harmonics or whatever that play kind of like sounds, right? That excite the brain into a more kind of learning and aware state. And so the basketball players train with those earphones in their heads to be more alert as to when they are actually shooting hoops and stuff. So the more of that kind of skill comes into the full body, right? And I was like, man, that's what I've been doing all my life, because I've been playing, like when you play music and you do wireframing, or you play piano and you're thinking about, you know, the project that you're working on. That's really the similar sort of thing. Dee, what do you think about this?
Before I used to think like, okay, when you are doing any project or working on something that requires a lot of deep thought, we have to just avoid all distractions, right? Because it's just noise. But in reality, it really helps in terms of our creative process. So I'm going to wrap it up on what I have to say, because I know that you wanted to keep this under, 45 minutes. But ultimately, my final thoughts on this is, by us being able to think deeply, we can really create and entertain thoughts that are more meaningful, valuable, creative, that are inspiring. And this in turn greatly influences how we behave. So, deep thinking can really just allow us to nourish our thoughts and our ideas in a more focused way that's contributing to society at large, which is pretty apparent. That's what we need to do. So that's all that I'll say on my end for that.
Thank you. Anthony, give us a bunch of like one-liners, that we can really contemplate for next Saturday. Or just say whatever you're thinking.
A bunch of one-liners.
Pressure's on.
Pressure's on. So I'll give you one of my favorite lines ever from one of my favorite books called Angel Tech, which translates as The Art of Being Light. Techne being art, and angel being light. Which is, are you deep enough to be shallow?
I love that. Wow.
So we keep talking about this thing. Yeah, there's like the film called Internship. We always talk about like, I've got this new idea, and it's like you take a picture and put it on the line. You put it on the line. It's like it's like such a dumb statement. Yet it's so there's something really.
Man, when he's like coming up with $1 billion idea. Don't interrupt the man.
Man, come on, look, I've got this $1 billion idea. I've been sitting on it for so long now. I've got constipation.
Oh, actually, on that point, I have to make this point. This is very. I think this is a deep point here. Please pay attention to this. So the other day, I sit with a very good friend of mine now, like a new guy I've met over Facebook, and we're talking about a business idea and blah blah blah. And he goes, "Oh, Jason, you're like a technological guy. You know music. You worked on these projects. You know business. You studied management. You run your own company. Blah blah." And he goes to me, "How come somebody like you isn't worth, £2 billion?"
Yeah.
And I turned around to him and said, "Who said I'm not worth £2 billion?" and who decides, right? Who decides? But then I kind of flipped the script on him a little bit, and I said, "Look, do you actually know what you said there?" He goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, do you know what £1 sterling means?" And he goes, "It's like £1 coin." And I said, "No, £1 sterling is £1 in weight of sterling silver. That's what £1 coin used to represent." So I said to him, "You've just compared me to £2 billion in weight of this metal, quote unquote precious metal. So instead of me having this mind and body and the thinking ability and the feeling and the kind of the attitude and everything that I am, you think that is swappable for £2 billion worth of this fucking damn metal, And I said, like, I'm not worth that. Like, I'm worth much more than that. And it was like, oh man, like, it was supposed to be a compliment. I was like, okay, I understand that you intended it as a compliment, but I just see it as so funny.
Someone said that I was a new prospective client yesterday, and he said, "Oh, and they said, oh yeah, and then I could charge what you charge what you're worth." And I said, like, if I charge what I'm worth, no one on this planet can afford me.
Very true.
Exactly. Like,
very true.
You can't go there. And so it reminded me, actually, as I was saying this to this guy, reminded me of like when somebody asked Warren Buffett, right? What would he rather have, $1 billion worth of company shares or $1 billion worth of gold, And he goes, whenever someone mentions like gold to me, I just see this like huge lump of metal that, what can I do with gold, right? It's like gold, I can kind of stroke it and it looks pretty there and so on, but it doesn't return anything on investment, doesn't really grow, it just kind of sits there. So because I would, at any point in time in my life, would have $1 billion worth of shares of various companies, that especially the ones that are like growing, doing important things, than just kind of this static lump of metal that I can just look at and be mesmerized by. And he goes, probably like the gold would make me start thinking, the evil thoughts, because there's this kind of like, the theory that like gold turns people into evil, kind of like, I want more gold, I want more gold. So yeah, I think that's my sort of gold thought to finish on.
You got a Midas touch.
Golden thoughts.
Shiny. All right, thank you very much. Now I've actually been told, like, by a friend, that unless I make calls to action for people to subscribe, all these like videos are going to get buried deep under all the cats and memes and like really shallow stuff. So whoever, if anyone ever watches this, subscribe to the channel. Oh my God. Yeah, next Saturday we'll see what the universe brings to us as a theme.
Subscribe and join our show. Bye, guys.
Thank you very much for joining, and thank you very much for being such deep and shallow thinkers. Bye-bye.